Walk outside on a sunny day in any populated area, and it's obvious that Pokémon Go has taken the world by storm. But before the Pokémon craze took over mobile phones, gamers the world over had already gone on many journeys, collecting the virtual creatures in one of the many handheld and console iterations of the franchise over the past 2 decades. Let's take a look back at the evolution of Pokémon. In 1996, Pokémon made a big splash in both Japan and the rest of the world, as the first generation of the monster-catching Game Boy series was released to massive sales and critical acclaim. The games, called Pokémon Red and Green in Japan and Pokémon Red and Blue elsewhere, were a set of Japanese RPGs that tasked the player with traveling across the mythical region of Kanto, attempting to collect all 151 Pokémon and defeat the Elite Four. The wildly successful game spawned numerous spin-offs, a hit anime television show, a trading card game, and a multimedia franchise that continues to grow and evolve to this day. Capitalizing on the success of the anime, an upgraded edition entitled Pokémon Yellow allowed players to undertake their Pokémon journey with iconic character Pikachu by their side. Further, Nintendo published spin-offs like Pokémon Snap, Pokémon Puzzle League, and Pokémon Stadium for its then-current home console, the Nintendo 64, allowing players to dive into the Pokémon universe on the big screen. Eventually, it was time for the main series to move on, and Game Freak and Nintendo delivered with a fresh generation of games, including all new monsters for trainers to catch in 1999. Dubbed Pokémon Gold and Silver, the Game Boy Color games moved the action from the Kanto region to the new Johto region, tasking players with catching a new slew of Pokémon. Not content to leave the gameplay exactly the same, Game Freak added new gameplay aspects such as items for Pokémon to hold during battle, new Pokémon types, and a real-world timing system. Much as Pokémon Red and Blue got an enhanced remake in Pokémon Yellow, so Gold and Silver received their own deluxe edition, entitled Pokémon Crystal. During the second generation, Nintendo continued to expand the franchise on other systems and through other spin-offs, such as the battle simulator Pokémon Stadium 2, which expanded on the previous Nintendo 64 game. If the second generation showed us anything, it was that Nintendo and Game Freak's strategy would be to keep the gameplay of the series' core titles essentially the same, while providing minor advancements and, of course, a new barrage of Pokémon each generation. However, the franchise's spin-offs and other licensed games showed the versatility of the Pokémon setting and characters as they adapted to a wide array of genres and systems. The third generation of Pokémon kicked off in 2002, finally moving off the aging Game Boy handheld console and landing on Nintendo's popular Game Boy Advance system. Utilizing the upgraded hardware to good effect, Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire brought even more new creatures into the world of Pokémon and made them come alive like never before with enhanced animation and sound during the game's newly revamped battle system. Ruby and Sapphire's new 2 vs 2 battle mode would become the norm for the series going forward, and it allowed a whole host of new tactical and strategic options for gamers battling their way through the Hoenn region. As with previous generations, these Game Boy Advance games got their own special remake entitled Pokémon Emerald. Nintendo also began the tradition of remaking Pokémon games from years past with Pokémon Fire Red and Pokémon Leaf Green, which reimagined the original Pokémon games from 1996 while capitalizing on the new Game Boy Advance hardware. As gamers prepared for the Pokémon franchise to make the big leap onto Nintendo's dual-screen successor to the Game Boy Advance, the Nintendo DS, the publisher continued to pump out non-core releases in the Pokémon universe, such as Pokémon Dash, Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, and Pokémon Ranger. 2 home console games, Pokémon Colosseum and Pokémon XD Gale of Darkness, provided gamers with almost a full-fledged Pokémon RPG experience on the Nintendo GameCube. While they allowed players to explore a 3D Pokémon world, they removed several key features that made the handheld game so popular and ended up failing to excite gamers in the same way the Game Boy games had for so many years. Even today, Nintendo has yet to release a full, robust home console RPG, as tantalizing as the idea is for many Pokémon fans. As the Nintendo DS hardware enjoyed widespread popularity, Nintendo, at long last, released the 4th generation games onto the hardware to its Japanese fans in 2006 with Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, with the worldwide versions releasing the following year. Adding another set of pocket monsters to the franchise, the games brought the total to just under 500 Pokémon. Using the Nintendo DS's hardware capabilities to churn out a blend of 3D polygons and classic sprites, the game took players on a journey through the region of Sinnoh. Most exciting in this generation was the introduction of online Wi-Fi battles and trading, though these online systems were still rudimentary and left a lot to be desired. Still, the games built the framework for future generations of online Pokémon play. Continuing the new tradition of revamping aging games in the series, the 4th generation also saw the re-release of beloved Game Boy titles Pokémon Gold and Silver onto the Nintendo DS, with Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. In the meantime, Nintendo continued to publish and support games in Pokémon's lucrative spin-off franchises, such as Pokémon Ranger and Pokémon Mystery Dungeon. Nintendo even released a long-overdue Pokémon Stadium sequel in the form of Pokémon Battle Revolution for the hot Nintendo Wii home console. The Nintendo DS enjoyed a long and successful lifespan, and as such received a second set of games ushering in the 5th generation of Pokémon. Pokémon Black and White hit Japan in late 2010 and packed a whopping 156 new creatures into the franchise. Black and White continued to grow the franchise and prove the amazing resilience of the cute battling pocket creatures, but still did not advance the series by leaps and bounds. Rather, Black and White continued the tradition of making slight advancements and minor evolutionary steps to the series' core gameplay. Interestingly, Nintendo followed Black and White up with a minor upgrade and direct sequel in the form of Black and White 2, something the company hadn't done up to that point. Black and White 2 changed up the formula of re-releasing the previous games in a deluxe edition, as had become the standard for years. Nintendo continued to publish games other than the core titles in the 5th generation, including the action-packed Pokémon Rumble games, more sequels to the Pokémon Mystery Dungeon series, and the bizarre but fun turn-based strategy game Pokémon Conquest. In 2013, Pokémon got its first fully 3D release in the form of Pokémon X and Y, a series of games that took players on a journey across the New Kalos region. In addition to providing a major technical update to the series in the graphics and sound department, the game brought with it a new form of evolution called Mega Evolution. Pokémon that can Mega Evolve temporarily transform into an even more powerful form, so their trainers can overcome the most challenging of foes. Pokémon X and Y was a breath of fresh air for the franchise, with the new, beautifully rendered 3D environments, making the Pokémon world come alive at long last. Additionally, Game Freak was able to finally deliver on the promise of online play half-heartedly introduced in the 4th generation. Utilizing the technology from X and Y, Game Freak developed remakes of Ruby and Sapphire, dubbed Pokémon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and released them to the public in 2014. Continuing its practice of supplementing core game releases with spin-offs, the Pokémon Company then collaborated with Bandai Namco Entertainment to develop Pokken Tournament, a classic-style fighting game for both arcade platforms and the Nintendo Wii U. While Pokémon X and Y pushed the 6th generation of Pokémon games to unprecedented levels of success, Nintendo recently announced their successors, Pokémon Sun and Moon, also for the Nintendo 3DS. The games are to be released in November of this year, and should bring with them the usual slew of upgrades and new set of Pokémon for trainers to try to catch. But of course, before Sun and Moon hit this fall, Pokémon fans all over the world are already going crazy for Pokémon Go, the hit mobile game developed by Niantic. Taking core Pokémon concepts like traveling through a land, catching Pokémon, evolving them into more powerful forms, acquiring items, and battling at gyms, Pokémon Go was an instant hit on its July 6 release earlier this year. Though Pokémon Go removes some essential aspects of Pokémon traditional gameplay like battling wild Pokémon, carrying a team of 6 of the creatures, trading with other Pokémon trainers, and working to defeat an evil team of criminals, the game makes up for it with its innovative geocaching-inspired formula. Asking players to actually walk out in the real world and catch Pokémon using augmented reality technology, the game has so far proven to be both deeply engaging for gamers and far more social than any Pokémon title before it. While catching a Pokémon in Pokémon Go is as easy as tossing a Pokéball at it, players soon discover the addictive nature of the game's mechanisms, and people all over the world are heading to the great outdoors to catch Pokémon, level up, and battle other teams to defend their local gyms. In a sense, Pokémon Go is the dream of a fully immersive, massively multiplayer Pokémon game finally realized, although not in the way anyone would have dreamed. No matter how you slice it, Pokémon Go is a massive success for Niantic and social gaming as a whole, as mainstream media sources continue to report on the worldwide phenomenon. What do Nintendo, Niantic, and Game Freak have in store for Pokémon fans next? There's no telling right now, but you can bet future updates on Pokémon Go will include more helpful features, more ways to interact, and of course, more Pokémon. We can't wait to see what they'll think up next. Until then, for all things Pokémon, keep it locked to gamers.